other Indian nations, the Mvskoke or Creek Nation traces its roots far back into the mist of prehistoric times. Our legends say that in the beginning, the Mvskoke people were born out of the earth itself. They crawled up out of the ground, through a hole, like ants. In those days, they lived in a far western land, beside tall mountains that reached the sky. They called the mountains the backbone of the earth. Then a strange fog descended upon the earth, sent by the master of breath, Mvskoke. The Mvskoke people could not see. They wandered around blindly, calling out to one another in fear. They drifted apart and became lost. The whole people were separated into small groups, and the people in these groups stayed close to one another in fear of being entirely alone. Finally, the master had mercy on them. From the eastern edge of the world where the sun rises, he began to blow away the fog. He blew and blew until the fog was completely gone. The people were joyful and sang a hymn of thanksgiving to the master of breath. And in each group, the people turned to one another and swore eternal brotherhood. They said that from then on, these groups would be like large families. The members of each group would be as close to each other as brother and sister, father and son. The group that was farthest east and first to see the sun praised the wind that had blown the fog away. They called themselves the Wind Family, or Wind Clan. As the fog moved away from the other groups, they too gave themselves names. Each group chose the name of the first animal it saw. So they became the bear, the deer, the alligator, the raccoon, and the bird clans. But some say the Wind Clan is the most important of all. Our legends also tell us that in ancient times the Mvskoke migrated eastward toward the rising sun. They settled in the southeastern region of North America in what is now Alabama and Georgia. There they established tribal towns along the rivers and streams that snake through the land. My people became successful farmers and hunters in those days. They built large ceremonial mound complexes at the center of the towns for religious ceremonies and council meetings. Modern archaeologists have uncovered vast quantities of ornately designed artifacts from these locations: engraved shells, copper plates, stone pipes, and other manufactured goods reveal a highly organized order of civilization. Long before the white man came, the Mvskoke people had formed a powerful union of tribes, or bands, called the Mvskoke Confederacy. At one time, their capital was located on the Okmulgee River in what is now Georgia, and representatives from each tribal town met in council there. Agriculture, art, trade, and other activities of the civilization flourished. The annual green corn ceremony was held each summer in the town squares, and regular stickball games were played on the town ball fields. Then, in 1540, Hernando de Soto, a Spanish explorer, and his army swept across the Mvskoke lands. It was the first time the Mvskoke had encountered Este, the white man, and things haven't been the same since. In the centuries that followed, immigrants from Spain, France, and England came to settle the lands of the New World. Because my people built their towns near waterways, the British called us Creek Indians, a name that has remained with us to this day. In the 1700s and 1800s, first the Europeans and then the Americans greedily cast their eyes on the lands of the Creek people. Untold numbers of settlers flooded our lands, and citizens of the new state of Georgia began calling for the removal of all Indians from their midst. Piece by piece, through warfare and treaty, our lands were slowly lost to them. Finally, defeat came at the hands of the cunning and deceitful Andrew Jackson in the Red Stick War of 1813 and 1814. Then the Indian Removal Act of 1830 forced the Creek people to give up their homelands in exchange for a new home west of the Mississippi River. Over 4,000 of my people died during the well-known forced migration that followed, the Trail of Tears. They marched through the bitter cold with little food or water to their new life in Indian Territory. Once in Indian Territory, the industrious and determined Mvskoke began the difficult task of rebuilding a nation in the unfamiliar land. The ancient tribal towns were reestablished. The sacred fires kept burning throughout the long journey were ceremoniously placed in the new town squares. Crops were planted, homes were built, ceremonial dances and the green corn celebration live on. After the Civil War, a permanent capital site for the new Creek Nation was selected near the Deep Fork River and named Okmulgee in honor of the old capital of the Creek Confederacy. A council house was built to serve as a meeting place for the principal chief and the Creek Nation's elected councilmen. A written constitution and a code of laws governed the nation during this period from 1867 to 1907. A national seal was adopted that reflected the Creek people's link to agriculture and land. The old traditions continued, but new institutions like missions, schools, and churches began to dot the landscape. But at the close of the 19th century, a rising tide of outsiders and intruders overwhelmed the Mvskoke people until they became once again a minority within their own lands. Economic, political, and social pressures from within and without Indian territory brought the era of tribal governments to a close. Individual land allotments broke up the communally held tribal lands as the Creek Nation was dissolved. But the Mvskoke never forgot who they were. In their homes, churches, and ceremonial grounds, they preserved the Creek ways and taught these ways to their children. But during the years following Oklahoma statehood, the problems of Indian people were mostly ignored. However, through the tireless efforts of a few Indian leaders, lawyers, and sympathetic legislators, conditions were gradually reversed, laws were changed, and old treaties reviewed. Then, in 1970, the Creeks and the rest of the 5 civilized tribes were allowed to hold elections for principal chiefs. For the first time in over 60 years, the Mvskoke people had a voice in choosing their leaders. Claude Cox was elected chief. He and a council of advisors began the difficult task of reestablishing the sovereignty of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. After studying the problems faced by Indian people, Chief Cox focused on improving the housing, education, employment, and health care for Creek people. In addition, he had the dream of someday making his people self-sufficient, able to pay their own way and make their own governmental decisions. Chief Cox and his advisors also knew that the tribal government needed a new set of rules to operate by, a new constitution for the nation. During a remarkable decade of development, tribal officials began resolving these challenges facing the Mvskoke people. Today, the Mvskoke Creek Nation has a revitalized tribal government. A new constitution ratified in 1979 guides tribal affairs. And the modern Creek Nation tribal complex houses the many offices and programs that benefit Indian people. The Creek Nation Housing Authority, the Solomon McCombs Office Building, the Dental Clinic, the IAP Building, the Indian Health Service, the General Administration Building, and the Independent Agencies Building, also known as the Mound. The Mound is modeled after an earthen lodge built by our people centuries ago in Georgia. That ancient mound was used during the days of the Mvskoke Confederacy as a meeting place for the National Council. This modern mound is used for the same purpose today, but also houses many support services and community services that aid Creek people. Across the street to the northeast of the complex lies the Creek Nation Elderly Housing Project, providing quality apartment living for Creek elders. In addition, improved housing for all needy Indian people is available through Creek Nation. Hundreds of low and moderate income Indian families now own their own homes thanks to the Creek Nation Housing Authority. And hundreds of other families are experiencing a higher standard of living because of Creek Nation's housing rehabilitation program. In healthcare, the tribe set a shining example which others have now followed. Creek Nation's healthcare delivery system was even featured in a nationally broadcast segment of the PBS program, Nova.
And in the field of health, the Creeks have been the first tribe in the nation to contract with the federal government to run their own health facilities, a hospital and 4 clinics. Sophisticated diagnostic tests such as ultrasound are readily available to patients at the hospital. And if a treatment can't be provided here, the patients are driven to Tulsa, an hour away. The Creeks healthcare program has become a model for other tribes in the nation to follow.
The there was some concern by the Indian Health Service that we could not provide the level of care that they had provided. However, we've shown that to be otherwise. The patient load has dramatically increased, and we've been able to expand services. There's a strong community spirit among the people that use the health facilities, and that creates a very strong bond between the people that deliver the health care and the people that receive it.
Creek Nation's community health centers are located in Sapulpa, Eufaula, and Okemah. Dental clinics are located in Eufaula, Sapulpa, and Okmulgee. The tribe's control of health care has eliminated waste in the system and increased cost effectiveness. Good nutrition is also an essential part of good health, and Creek Nation is having a positive impact there too. First, with the implementation of the Elderly Nutrition Program, which has been operating in Creek communities since 1981, and second, with the administration of the tribe's Commodity Food Distribution Program, which began in 1982. These two programs help ensure that low-income and elderly Indian people get good basic nutrition daily. Creek Nation has been so efficient in its administration of programs and its accounting and reporting procedures that the tribe has been awarded their Certificate of Compliance in Financial Reporting for 7 consecutive years. This is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental financial reporting.
In 1982, the tribe assumed the management and operation of all programs previously run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Creek Nation area. This move further reduced duplication of services and improved the performance of these programs for the good of all Indians within the Creek Nation jurisdiction. But these accomplishments were possible primarily because of education, the education of Indian people. Indian people learning how to manage, how to compete, how to succeed. Creek people of all ages benefit from the tribe's current educational and training programs.
For preschoolers, there are Creek Nation Head Start centers in Yeager, Eufaula, Sapulpa, and Okmulgee. These programs ensure that 4-year-olds do get a head start in life by providing them with early childhood development activities and hot nutritional meals.
For middle school and high school students, special youth programs provide skills training and leadership training for tomorrow's adults. For older students, further assistance is available in the form of scholarships to vocational schools and universities anywhere in the United States. But education has been a high priority with the Creeks for over 100 years. In Indian Territory days, the tribe built its own boarding schools, hired its teachers, and educated its youth to be successful in the white man's world. The Eufaula boarding school, once supervised by Alexander Posey, is the only reminder of that era. In modern surroundings with the latest educational technology, Indian students continue to receive an education that enables them to face the challenges of their times. Many other Creek children are educated in small rural public schools scattered throughout the Creek Nation. There they learn what it's like to compete in today's American society. Athletics can provide keys to understanding competition and building self-confidence. Many Creek youth excel in sports, softball, basketball, track, and rodeo. Indian youth and adults get a chance to participate in these events and more during the annual Creek Nation Festival. Thousands converge on Okmulgee each year during the 3rd weekend in June for fun, food, and recreation. Athletic competition is a key ingredient, including the Creek Nation All-Indian Rodeo. It's held in the tribe's own rodeo arena, designed and built through Creek Nation's Economic Development Program. Economic development is a primary tribal objective now, and Creek Nation's newest economic enterprise is high-stakes bingo. Creek Nation's Bingo Hall, located on tribal land in Tulsa, provides jobs for over 100 Indians and brings in a monthly profit to the tribe in excess of $50,000. And a variety of other economic ventures are being explored that will help the tribe reach its goal of self-sufficiency. In the face of all these challenges and changes, Creek communities have provided continuity. Continuity between the past, the present, and the future. Ceremonial grounds and churches continue to pass on values, the things that have always been important and have meaning to the Mvskoke. The green corn ceremony, known to the Creek people for nearly 2,000 years, is still practiced today at a dozen or so ceremonial grounds in the Creek Nation. These grounds are all that remain of the once mighty tribal towns of the Mvskoke Nation of prehistoric times. The celebration is held annually at the time of the ripening of the new corn. It is a time of renewal and thanksgiving, fellowship, and feasting. The people thank the Creator for his many blessings, and they cleanse their hearts and bodies for the year to come. Indian families leave their jobs and homes for 1 week in the summer to camp at the ceremonial ground. There they make preparations for the ceremony. The heart of the event begins at sunset on Friday with a women's ribbon dance. The tribal town chief, or Miko, supervises the whole affair, and in some cases leads the ceremonial songs and prepares the herbal medicine for the occasion. The number 4 is sacred among traditional Creeks, representing the 4 seasons, the 4 directions, and the 4 phases of a person's life. Everything in the green corn celebration is done in sets of 4. The ribbon dance is made up of 4 sets of songs, each set repeated 4 times. The next morning, a new fire is kindled in the middle of the square. 4 logs pointing in the 4 cardinal directions feed the fire. Herbal medicine is prepared by the medicine maker, and all the people in the camp cleanse themselves with it. First, the girls and the women take the purifying and relaxing mixture. Later, the men and boys do the same. That afternoon, the men perform the feather dance. They say that ages ago, these songs were taught to the Mvskoke by the white crane. It was a magical time when men and animals spoke the same language, and Indians learned medicine from these animals, the 4-legged ones. That night, the camp is filled with visitors who come to stomp dance all night long. Various singers take turns leading the songs which accompany the stomp dance. The songs are about nature, love, politics, humor, and other things. Another important annual event at the stomp grounds is the Stickball Game. This ancient game, known as the Little Brother of War, was once played between tribal towns to settle disputes and to improve the stamina and skill of the warriors. Nowadays, the game is usually played in September by visitors from several tribal towns. After a full night of stomp dancing, the men and boys of the hosting town form 2 opposing teams in the square. Ball sticks laid on the ground ensure that the 2 teams are evenly matched. Then visiting players are called into the square and divided between the teams. Chanting and circling the ceremonial fire for the last time this season, the players begin to mentally prepare themselves for the game. War hoops punctuate the chanting as the spirit of friendly competition mounts. The balls to be used in the game have been especially prepared by the medicine maker, and he carries them to the playing field. The playing field, lined with spectators' cars, is 100 yards long and lies in an east-west direction. The 2 teams are simply named the East and the West. After final preparations, the rules of the game are explained to the players, and they are reminded of ancient tribal roots of this event. Then the game begins. The players position themselves on the field in a series of groupings or clusters. Each cluster is made up of players of both teams. The young boys make up a cluster of their own. Each team scorekeeper keeps track of his team's score with a bundle of sticks. The first team reaching 20 points wins the game. For over 100 years, the church has also played a key part in maintaining the strength of Creek communities. Over 70 little country churches, mostly tucked away from the outside world, provide guidance, comfort, and strength to the people. Creek hymns praise God in the Mvskoke tongue. This, too, is a time of renewal and thanksgiving, fellowship and feasting. A time to reflect on the blessings of God and strengthen family and community bonds. To face the future, the Mvskoke must remain strong in our hearts, and in our minds, and in our communities. For in our veins flows the blood of the Mvskoke. This common bond will sustain us and unify us now and far into the future.